So other than Crowder and Shapiro and basically every Republican lawmaker, maybe there are people out there who do believe in equal bodily autonomy for everyone, are pro-choice, and would be okay with abortion. But those people also see a morally gray area with late-term abortions, which is not a medical term but a political one, by the way. That's worth talking about, because those are people who might easily be swayed into banning abortions completely. I think it's also what Tim Pool thinks he is. There are a lot of people who often say stuff like, I'm all for choice, but we need to draw a line. So logically, facts before feelings, etc., if you don't want late-term abortions, the best way to do that is to allow access to abortion early and remove any barrier to early intervention, which again is what 92% of abortions already are. Like we mentioned earlier, the reasons for that small percentage of later abortions, other than saving the mother's life or conditions for the fetus incompatible with life, is the person simply not having access to an abortion earlier. So, if we want all non-medical abortions to happen early, shouldn't we make it easier to have abortions right away? If it's really about that gray area of later abortions, the Tim Pools of the world should be really invested in making sure people have access to abortions as early and easily as possible. And shit, if you're really against abortion altogether, shouldn't you also be screaming from the rooftops for more access to sex education? Abstinence-only education actually raises teen pregnancies, while comprehensive sex education decreases them. Teens who got comprehensive sex education were 60% less likely to report becoming pregnant or impregnating someone than teens who did not receive sex education, and 50% less likely than teens who received abstinence-only education. Another study found that an increase in funding for comprehensive sex education lowered the overall teen birth rate in the whole country by 3%. There's also evidence that family planning education and counseling provided by Planned Parenthood reduced unintended pregnancies. You know, that thing anti-choice people hate. I don't really support meeting these ghouls at their level, but it's worth pointing out that abortion in this country has been going down for decades. After Roe v. Wade passed, there was a brief increase in the number of abortions, and then a steady decline. This is a trend seen in other countries around the world with legal abortion. In fact, nations studied that had more restrictive abortion laws actually saw an increase in the rates of abortion. This doesn't necessarily mean that abortion restrictions directly cause abortions, or a lack of those laws directly causes the rates to go down, but it could be that societies with more restrictions may also limit other aspects of reproductive education, health, and control, which would then result in more unintended pregnancies and more abortions. And so if you actually wanted fewer abortions, or really valued all life, it's actually against your goal to eliminate places like Planned Parenthood. It's against your goal to support the GOP's agenda on healthcare in general. For example, the Affordable Care Act may have led to greater access to contraceptives, which has, according to the Guttmacher Institute, driven the long-term decline in adolescent pregnancies and births. But since providing people healthcare, contraceptives, and education is too communist, it's apparently much easier to blame women, or anyone who can get pregnant. Ooh, and also immigrants! We love blaming immigrants for junk and stuff. Because maybe, just maybe, for some of these people, it's not actually about preserving life at all, so much as preserving a population. The white population, to be specific. As you might have already heard, there's this thing going around called the Great Replacement Theory. It's a white nationalist belief that white people are being replaced by brown people, which is espoused by right-wing terrorists and Tucker Carlson, the "and" there being optional. And this flaccid Nazi hogwash is also often used as a justification to ban abortion. To quote the head of the Conservative Political Action Conference, Matt Schlapp, if you say there is a population problem in a country, but you're killing millions of your own people through legalized abortion every year, if that were to be reduced, some of that problem is solved. If you're worried about this quote-unquote replacement, why don't we start there? Start with allowing our own people to live. This is where we get into that Handmaid's Tale. The people casually pitching we turn American women, white American women, into baby factories to keep those damn immigrants from living here? Somehow? Now, I'm not here to call every anti-choice person a white supremacist, just Tucker Carlson, but I do think that this anti-abortion stuff, combined with the GOP's total unwillingness to support contraception or actual sex education, combined with their absolutely up views and policies on rape and incest, feels like it's purposefully designed to force women to have babies they don't want. Either because of some religious or traditional view of what a woman is supposed to be, a secret need to control women, or yeah, maybe some of them are white supremacists. What they certainly aren't worried about is actually protecting children. And in fact, they might hate children. It sounds harsh, but I'm just going by every single one of their legislative actions when it comes to children. Remember when I said we'd talk about how the GOP and Dems sure hate children? This is that part. And as a disclaimer, nothing against people who hate children. I hate children all the time. Just this morning, I threw a brick at a school bus. But it's pretty darn hypocritical of these people claiming to be pro-life to ignore all of the actual health problems that kids in this country face every day. Like I mentioned earlier, our infant mortality rates are a joke, but not like a ha-ha joke, compared to other rich and even much less rich countries. We're worse than Latvia, whose per capita GDP is less than a fourth of that of the US. Research has shown that the disparity between our infant mortality rates and other countries actually increases after birth and in the first few months. It seems like prenatal death of babies is not as significantly different than the postnatal death of babies, especially once they reach a month of age. So we are failing babies once they're born and trying to survive their first few months. Socioeconomic factors seem to be driving this almost entirely. According to this study, why is infant mortality higher in the United States than in Europe? Higher US post-neonatal mortality relative to Europe is due entirely, or almost entirely, to higher mortality among disadvantaged groups. So if you care about these babies' lives, you should support spending on welfare for parents, such as child tax credits, which Republicans and pseudo-Republicans oppose. Sad trombone noise, or maybe sad baby noise? Sad baby playing a sad trombone noise. Beautiful. Good. Hey, aside, it's actually really hard to work jokes into a video about dead kids and abortion, but we're doing it! Ha 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 ha. Anywho, school children can get bent and go hungry, says Mitch McConnell, who wants to, big air quotes, defend innocent human life. And don't get me started on children who weren't lucky enough to be born on America brand dirt. If conservatives love children, they should be opposing sanctions in Afghanistan, which are predicted to kill 1 million children due to starvation if they're not stopped. But Republicans are of course in favor of sanctions, as is the Biden administration who imposed them. Republicans, as well as establishment Democrats, also oppose the proposal by Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal that would assess the sanctions to see where they could be eased to save children's lives. So, kind of seems like they hate children, or maybe it's cold indifference. But they sure aren't indifferent when it comes to embryos, because when it comes right down to it, they like the embryos, fetuses, heck, even the blastocysts, more than fully realized children. Probably because the embryos don't need money for schools or medical care. The fetus can't protest climate change or have opinions or come out as gay or trans and get sent to conversion torture camps. A blastocyst is a model citizen because it has no free will. It's just the vague concept of a person without any complex details, like a crash test dummy or Gwyneth Paltrow. So maybe that's why there's so much more concern with fighting for the zygote's right than for children to be able to go to school without getting murdered. We've had many instances of mass murder of children, even though it sure seems like one is too many. But even after Columbine, Sandy Hook, Stoneman Douglas High, and now the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, the only answer Republicans have to, hey, our children are dying in their own schools, is proposing dumb like invading schools with former military members. Yeah, just put the military in schools. It'll be a great learning tool to teach children about imperialism. Other solutions include Ted Cruz's get rid of all the doors except one door in schools, which is a good way to turn a school into a death cube in the case of a fire, or just a regular prison. Or like the other solution is arming teachers, which is weird given that Republicans now think teachers are brainwashing and grooming children. So they obviously want to give those teachers guns? Not to mention, now you have a school full of guns for kids to find, like the world's worst scavenger hunt. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.